was hearkening back because the Supreme Court is having a term that is started first Monday in October.
Right.
And I recall distinctly a call from you saying, Greg, have you thought about, would you consider bringing in friends of yours, or at least acquaintances of yours,
right,
who were part of a Supreme Court case? And I had to really do some quick, well, the answer was of course, but then I did some research on it, and little did I realize that Mr. Campion was a Jamestown, New York native and a plaintiff. How did you know them, and how did that all happen?
Through a series of other friends.
Yeah.
And once I found the connection between Paul and Jamestown, I mean, outside of those connections, just that issue is such a major, major issue, and something that's close to me. I'm gay and have you know, a direct link to, you know, what happens with that case. So once I found that out, I thought, well, I wonder how many people in Jamestown is aware of this. And I'm just talking with people, I realized not many at all.
Right.
So that's when I approached you, and you know, Jamestown gets, you know, a bad rap a lot of times, and we have so many positive things here. And the connection with that court case and the Jackson Center is just like, you know, this has got to happen.
Well, you called, you encouraged, and it happened. It was really one of the highlights that I enjoyed so much, not only the legal aspect of it and the timing, because the case had been argued, but not decided.
Right, yes.
And just to have a chance to have John Barrett came in, the biographer of Jackson, to talk about the law, and then for me to have a chance to talk to the two of them as individuals. It was cool.
Yes, it was. It was a great evening. And there was a lot of feedback from people that just, that I didn't know personally, that I ran into afterwards. So, you know, next few weeks after that, you know, were thrilled that that happened, and they were able to, you know, have a first-hand account of that.
It would not have happened. The Jackson Center would not have had a chance to do what was streamed nationally without you, Michael Dykeman.
Well, it, like I said, it was an effort of many people. So.
Yeah. Well, thank you so much. And in fact, the Jackson Center this weekend is hosting an event based on, you know, coming out and working with the Fenton History Center.
Right, right.
So you've got the center tuned in on all of that as well. So, are you a native? Tell me a little bit about you.
No, I'm from upstate New York, Herkimer County, central New York. Very small town called Dowdgeville, founded by Alfred Dowdge, a German immigrant. Population 3,000 currently. Turn of the 20th or 19th century, population was 12,000, so it was kind of booming for a small town.
What'd your mom and dad do?
My mother was kind of a homemaker extraordinaire, many interests. My father, I didn't know that well. He was killed very early in my life. I think I was like 5 years old. So, but my grandfather kind of took the place of that, and he was truly an amazing man who self-taught, 4 languages, traveled all over the world, backpacked in the 1920s across this country because he had an interest in the world, and he wanted to meet people. And I think he spent like 5 years or so just traveling around this country, just backpacking, and amazing stories. You know, master carpenter, built some of the great camps in the Adirondacks, and kind of a wonderful part of my life.
So he sort of brought you up together with your mother, is it?
Yes, strange personality. I've always been very, very independent. Mm-hmm. So, and stubborn. I'm sure I put my family through craziness. But so even as a child, I would spend time with my mother at my home with my brothers, and then I would get this whim, and I would be staying with my grandfather for a few months. So it's back and forth, and but that kind of continued all my life. This, here and there.
Where did he live nearby?
No, well, he lived in upstate, but it was probably maybe 120 miles or so from where I lived, where my mother was.
Was there a continuity of school, though? Did you?
Well, yes and no. I mean, it's changed. Some rules and regulations today are so different than then. The town I grew up in was separated by a river, so it spanned both counties, Herkimer County and Fulton County, and each had their own school district, but you could choose which one you wanted to go to. And myself and a lot of my friends would switch schools back and forth, and I'm sure it made the teachers crazy, and and now they wouldn't ever allow that. But at the time, it's like if you had either a dispute with a teacher or something happened, well, I'm just going to go to the other school, so I probably went through like 3 high schools. No kidding. Which was great. Extended circle of friends and experiences and stuff. But like I said, I'm sure it made the administration absolutely nuts.
So you graduated from high school. Did you go on to college?
Yes, not to. Well, I planned to go to art school, and as a high school graduation gift, I got a 2-week trip to Los Angeles to visit an aunt and uncle who I'd never met. And at the end of the 2 weeks, I called my mother and said that I wasn't coming home. And I didn't go home for 3 years. And but it was the greatest 3 years of my life. And obviously I didn't go to art school. But I just got, it was the perfect timing for everything. I just got caught up into this atmosphere of what was happening in that city, the friends I was making, and it was probably the greatest education possible.
Well, describe it further.
Well, the aunt and uncle that I was going to visit, like I said, I'd never met them. There were stories about them within the family. It was my mother's sister and her husband, excuse me. And all I knew was that they owned a few nightclubs, but I didn't know much more. And it turned out that they owned 3 of the most famous gay bars in the country. And so it was like, a kid going to Disneyland, that aspect, Los Angeles itself. I mean, it was, I was questioning kind of my sexuality, kind of had clues or whatever, but, like most teenagers, you're not positive. But then you're thrown into this situation. It's like, oh my goodness, what's the odds of this ever happening? And my aunt and uncle, the main club was called the Canyon Club, and it was a private membership-only club. Very, very, unfortunately, very restricted. My uncle was not the nicest man. He was an ex-vice officer from the LAPD who had, I probably shouldn't say this, but it's fact, that over the years had been on the take, and once he retired from the LAPD, he decided that he would open these bars because he knew they would be a money maker. And he knew all the ins and outs and who to pay off and who not to avoid, closure. But So the first few days I was there, they were kind of keeping this information from me, that what type of bars and clubs these were, and I kept saying, I want to go, I want to see what they are. And so my aunt, who was an incredible woman, she was kind of like an Annie Mame kind of character, I kind of wore her down. And so the Canyon Club was only open on Friday and Saturday. And so she goes, okay, but you have to do exactly what I say, and you have to stay, kind of hidden away. And also, I was underage, too. Yeah. So I went down, and I think I was in there maybe 20 minutes before I realized what this was. And she is she doesn't know how I'm going to take this. And finally, I just said, point blank, are these people gay? And she goes, well, yes. And I'm going, oh my goodness, really? It was like, so that was like this whole new chapter of my life that was, like I said, it was probably the best education, because the people that I met there were, since it was membership and private, there were people from every profession that you could think of that could go there and be themselves and not have to worry about being found out or somebody taking their photograph. And many, many celebrities were members, politicians, I mean, you name it. And so the people that I met there, contacts that I made, carried me, all through my life.
Was this sort of the genesis of interest in what you, when we know as Dykeman and Young?
Yes, because I kind of fell in with a group of people my own age, like late teens, early 20s, and they mostly were the sons and daughters of Hollywood people, directors and producers or stars or whatever. And I kind of got to see kind of the business aspect of that business, and things kind of just snowballed. Found my own little niche within that community, and nothing, was like, nothing was planned out. Like I picked, well, I want to do this. It just, everything seemed to just happen and fall in place.
Well, describe the niche.
Well, once I'd finally kind of focused, of the interest, I was always wearing vintage clothing. I just, even in high school, I wore, like shirts from the 1920s that my mother had to iron every morning, and so that just continued. When I moved to LA, it just expanded. Most of my wardrobe was vintage, and I'd be either at a friend's house or having dinner someplace, and somebody would come up to me and make a comment and say, "Where did you get this?" And a lot of times they were within the industry, somehow connected to a film, and the interest was, where we're looking for something like that. Where can we find it? And I realized that this could be a business. I could. So I opened up a shop in Los Angeles. When I opened the vintage clothing store, there were 10 vintage clothing stores in the entire LA area. And when I closed, a number of years later, there were hundreds and hundreds. It just was such a huge business. But within that, my niche was film. And at first, I was just finding pieces for production or dressing a certain character. And then I realized that this is really silly to sell it, because now I'm going to have to go try to find it again. I'll rent it. And that's how that business started. And that just grew and grew and grew.
How'd you find it? I mean, you see that I got TV, the pickers, all that stuff?
Right. Well, a similar thing. I mean, when I first started, it was a lot easier because there's more things available. I could go to a local thrift store and for $25 load up a vehicle, of amazing, 20s and 30s vintage. So at the beginning, it wasn't that difficult, but as the popularity of vintage grew, and the demand was so great that you had to go out farther and farther to find it. And I used to go on buying trips, pick an area of the country, and go and spend 2 or 3 weeks shopping and shipping back to LA.
So this is sort of, and there are folks in the old, my recent time that went around and bought furniture. They'd come out here to Clymer and Sherman.
Right.
They were from elsewhere just to buy the furniture and ship it out. Were you that same thing?
Yes, basically. But then I developed relationships with people in certain areas that they would then do that and ship it to me. So I didn't have to. Once I kind of clued them into what I'm looking for and all the specifics of that, and then chose people in different areas of the country because certain areas are good for one thing or another. But to build a collection, I mean, it took a lot of legwork. But
with a film, so film is commissioned. They hire somebody to go out, and it's a period piece. It's an 1860s Civil War time period or
right.
Western. They then call you, Michael Dykeman, and say, "Here's what we're got to do. We'd like to fit out this time period."
Every production is kind of different. The way they work things. But basically, once I became established, you would get a call either from the director or from the costume designer, letting you know that they're starting this production and what it's about. So then you got to decide if this is something that's of interest to you and if you want to do it. You'll get a script, you read the script, decide, okay, do I have the right pieces for this, what the looks are. Then you meet again with either the director or the costume designer for specifics. You get a breakdown, numbers for each scene, what the color palette is, and then you start from there. Mm-hmm. The principals, the leading characters are the priority always, so that's the first thing that you tackle. And then extras. You get a scene breakdown that there's 50 people in this scene, there's 25 men, 25 women, and what the season is, what the color palette is, and then it's up to you to pull. And so to fit 25 men, you need to probably pull 50 outfits, because the extras are not cast until just before they're used. So the extra part is fairly easy to do. It's time consuming, but it's easy. The principals is something that you work hours and hours on to find the right shirt or the right dress. And, but if it comes together, then it's fine. It's all worthwhile and great.
You've got to have a huge inventory.
Yes, yeah. Well, I spent 12 years shopping and stockpiling to build it. Because, you have to have a range of sizes. Not only do you have to have a range of styles from every era, but within that era, the types, are they upscale? Are they blue collar? Up until probably the 70s, you could look at somebody, or you look at a photo, or see somebody on the street, and pretty much know their station in life. After the 70s, that was almost impossible.
Right.
From what somebody wears, you cannot tell what their social status is, how much money they may have, you know. But before that, you know, so, you know, if it's a wealthy person, he's only going to wear this type of clothing. He's not going to wear something that a blue-collar factory worker would wear. So you have to have, you know, a great range of styles and sizes, children's as well. The only thing I didn't do was uniforms. There's too many components to everything, and it just didn't have the same interest to me.
So you had a niche within a niche. You were costuming, but it was not. It was just a certain.
Yes, and the collection became desirable to many, many people because of the range and the condition. If it's you know, an upscale piece, it can't have any damage. It has to be pristine. It has to be like it was when it was made. If it's a character piece, then sometimes the more wear on it, the better, because that you can't duplicate that, and that's what you can see today in a lot of movies where they'll make up the costume, and it just sticks out so much.
Yeah. With your glass, when you were really focused in on you know, watching movies, were you the most critical guy at the movie looking at the costumes?
I tried not to be, because sometimes that would take away from the enjoyment of the movie. Because that's all you're concentrating on is that one aspect, and you're missing the big picture. But every once in a while, you know, there will be a glaring mistake, and it's like you're shaking your head. It's like, I can't believe that went through. But like I said, every production company works differently. The thing that early on that used to really bug me was I would see a piece in a movie worn by a principal, and then 6 months later, a year later, see that same piece in another film on another actor. And so once I started really renting full time, I decided that I would never allow that to happen. So once we used a piece on a principal, we never used it again. It went to archives. And it turned out where the director and the producer and the costume designer really appreciated it, because they knew that that piece, you know, is not going to show, you know, the light of day again. Because it's amazing, especially on women that remember pieces.
They do.
You know. So.
Well, I can still recall with great enjoyment the exhibits you had on 2nd and 3rd Street, or 2nd Street rather, on your floors regarding the actors and the...
Right, right.
Do you still have that? Is it still up there?
Most of it, yes. I mean, in the last couple of years, I'm now dealing with a lot of collectors.
Yeah.
And there's... I still have the archives. I still is a lot of stuff in archives, but I have decided to let a few pieces go to collectors.
What's the one everybody wanted to have? They just tried to work you for years.
Well,
I knew you had an Indiana Jones piece.
Yes. That piece is in Australia now to a really major collector. The pieces that I have now that I get a lot of people wanting are the pieces from Oh Brother, Where Art Thou? And DiCaprio. A lot of, because I've worked with him a number of times, I have a lot of his stuff, and people are always wanting. But this week is the 20th anniversary of Oh Brother, Where Art Thou? But those pieces are so recognizable that Forrest Gump's pieces, I only have one left, and those are, oh my God, all over this world, spread out.
Well, that's got to make you feel wonderful that you actually at some point retrieved from the dustbin something, you brought it to Hollywood, you then rented it, to a production company, which in turn, it then became somewhat iconic.
Yeah, oh, on a number of times. Forrest Gump, because, I mean, that was such a, for volume of pieces, I mean, it was probably, I mean, there were thousands of garments in that movie. And a lot of that was sourced locally. Salvation Army. There's a scene in Forrest Gump where he runs for a period of time all across the nation. So there was a lot of changes in that scene, and it had to be stuff that could have been sourced, you know. You try to do a backstory in every character, even though the audience will never know that. So whatever he's wearing, it had to be sourced easily for him locally, wherever he was. So we just thrifted that stuff. So there are pieces that, and a lot of that is long shots, but there are some close-ups in that series of takes where that piece was on the rack at the Salvation Army, you know, that I thought, well, this would be the perfect piece for that, you know. But when I find pieces, I know this is a great film piece. Mm-hmm. I don't think where I'm going to use or when. It's like to have in case I need it. Right. So I could buy a piece today and not use it for 10 years or never use it or use it tomorrow, you know. But
so you have a warehouse in Los Angeles? Was that your principal location?
Well, that's where I started, yes. And did it for 20 years in Los Angeles. And then we moved here and did it for another 12 years here.
Where was it located? Where was your warehouse?
Here?
Yeah.
On Jones and Gifford. Yeah, nobody knew.
No, I for one did not know.
No.
I knew it was someplace.
There was no point because we're not open to the public. Sure. We don't deal with any retail. And it's such a curiosity type business, sure. You know. But it would be funny when Craig and I would be out dinner here locally, and you overhear conversations, and every once in a while you'll hear somebody talking about, and one person will be explaining to another person that they're dining with, especially during the making of Titanic and after the release of Titanic, and this person say, yeah, well, all that stuff came from Jamestown, and the other person, no, you know, it did, it came from here, you know. But we never wanted to publicize what we were doing. Every once in a while I would get a call from a newspaper, including the Post-Journal, but more outside this area, bigger cities, for either an interview or photos or whatever, and we just never, it was never anything I had an interest in, mm-hmm. You know, publicizing. And the people who needed to know knew, kind of thing. Yeah. But every once in a while at the warehouse, it would be either getting ready to close, and I'd hear somebody on the stairs and going, Craig, I think we have visitors, and you go out and somebody, you know, kind of tracked down. I'm going, no, I'm sorry, I don't know what you're talking about.
Well, tell me, it's Dykeman and Young, and Craig Young.
Yes.
Tell me about him.
Craig was born here. Craig went to school here, left here, and went to the Navy. We met in Los Angeles. I met Craig in 1972, mm-hmm. Walking down Hollywood Boulevard. I had, after my aunt and uncle, I only stayed with them for maybe 3 or 4 months, and mm-hmm. I'd had that, like I said, a stubborn streak. Very independent. I wanted to be on my own, so I moved into Hollywood, right off of Hollywood Boulevard on Sycamore Avenue, into this amazing 3-story 1920s apartment complex that was built by the studios to house ingenues in the 20s and 30s. 1 or 2 bedroom apartments. And I moved in there after I moved out of Topanga Canyon, and a lot of the ladies that were living there were the original residents. They were little starlets in the 20s and 30s who are now, you know, in their 70s, who are still with the same makeup from, I mean, it was like a movie set. But it was wonderful because they had the greatest stories. So since I lived just off of the boulevard, I was on the boulevard a lot. So I'm walking down, going to dinner, and Craig and his mother was walking towards me, and they stopped me and they were asking for directions. Mm-hmm. And so, you start talking, and he had just moved to Hollywood. He wasn't too familiar with a lot of things. His mother and father came out to visit. So ended up that we went to have coffee and some dessert. And his mother was a wonderful, wonderful woman. And so she had like a million questions. So by the end of the evening, it was kind of like this friendship was blooming. And it turned out that he lived 2 blocks off the boulevard at the other end of Hollywood Boulevard. So we ended up sort of seeing each other quite a bit, and just blossomed from there. But yeah, so that's how we ended up coming back to Jamestown when we moved. Was
he in your business too?
He was in banking.
Okay.
And then I kind of talked him out of that after a few years, and I thought, the costuming thing is growing, and just come and, we'll do this together, and that's what we did. Yeah, so his roots were here. So after he left the Navy, he decided that he didn't want to come back to Jamestown, that he wanted to be in a bigger city. So he chose Los Angeles. So I hadn't returned back to my hometown for like 3 years. He hadn't been back to Jamestown for about 5 or 6 years. So once we got together, we made a few trips back and forth visiting, either to my hometown or to Jamestown or whatever. But his interest in the business was more on the business aspect rather than sort of the creative side of it, which was a good balance.
When the production company and you're dealing with the principals, and what do they send to you? Pictures, size? I mean, you got to know that this guy's 5'8". He's
well, yeah. Once you do the script, first of all, you got to understand what the story is,
right.
And then it's a number of meetings, kind of getting what the director has in mind, what the costumer has in mind, what you think is appropriate. So all this goes on before casting. So there's probably a few weeks of just deciding what the look is going to be. Then they do location casting. Now that's going to be information that you're going to need. What area of the country is this filmed in? Every area of the country is going to have a certain look to it. And then once casting is completed, then you get the breakdown. And on extras, it isn't as much information because a lot of the extra casting isn't done until a few days before filming. But you'll get numbers. Like I said, if it's a scene of 50, 25, 25, kind of, there might be 10, middle age, a few seniors, a few children. So it's all very general. The principles is very, very specific, and that you'll get, pages of information on that character, outside of their vitals or their weight and height and, sizes, likes and dislikes, pet peeves. I mean, it's endless detail. This actor won't wear vinyl. I mean, just on and on and on. And some of it, is understandable. Every once in a while, you'll get some crazy person, with a crazy request.
Well, what's the craziest?
Well, I don't know what's the craziest because I've had a lot, but I won't say her name, but there's this one actress, and it was a 1930s storyline. And everything worked until we got to footwear. I mean, she wasn't complaining about anything. Everything, whatever he chose, whatever, fine. It got to footwear. She insisted that she wear her Nikes.
Uh,
And it's like, you can't wear Nikes. It's 1930. Outside of the fact that it's an athletic shoe and you're in kind of an upscale, I mean, but she just couldn't wrap her head around this. You know, this is what she wants, and this she gets her way. So they end up constructing this beautiful boot that would fit over her Nikes. I mean, and spent, you know, thousands probably, you know, doing this just to appease her, you know. So I mean, it's craziness like that. and put probably many people in many departments through, you know, agony trying to figure out how to do this.
Did you have access to, were you part of the fittings with the principals at some point?
After I'd been doing it for a few years and people got to know me and the collection, I kind of was able to do things that most people weren't allowed. I was on set a lot. My choice. If it was a story that I really loved, or it was an actor that I liked and wanted to meet, I would go, and then hoping that I wasn't going to be disappointed in this person that was a good person and not just, you know, a prima donna. But all the, you know, for like the costume designer, all the work is done before filming. So once filming starts, you're pretty much a babysitter because you've already selected everything that's going to be worn, everything has been planned out. So you can go to set, but it's pretty boring because you're not doing anything. If you look at the credits on films, you'll get the different department people. And there's one that says key costumer, which is probably the worst job in the world because all you are is a babysitter. You pull the costume, which has already been pre-selected and tagged and everything for the actor to put on. You come back at the end, you take it from him, you make sure all the components are still there, and that's it. I mean, there's nothing creative about that. So I would go if there was something that interested me.
Well, drop a name or two. Somebody you really wanted to meet. You knew you had costumed it, and therefore you kind of...
Well, Johnny Depp, George Clooney, Tom Hanks, you know, DiCaprio, Hoffman. The younger people, I was never, because you never knew, from my experience when I had the shop, because we got a lot of celebrities that would come in to buy for their regular civilian wear. They were going to a party that night, they wanted something different. So I worked with a lot on that kind of one-to-one kind of basis. And I found that a lot of the new stars, up and coming, their egos were so gigantic that you couldn't get past that to find out who this person is. But the established stars, the ones that have been around for a while, had already gone through that phase in their life. Mm-hmm. And now we're just decent, ordinary people. And so those are the ones that I chose kind of to go to meet if I hadn't met them before. Looking back, I mean, some of those new ones now are major stars that I probably should have gone to meet, but I didn't. But I wasn't too disappointed in most. I mean, most people who they seem to be. Like Tom Hanks is just a good guy. George Clooney is a good guy. I mean, what you see is what you get. A couple who are major actors, have been around and made many films, were not the nicest people. But they weren't nice to anybody, you know. It was just part of their nature. But thankfully, you know, they were in the minority.
Did you ever, as you were to look, think, you know, the films that you costumed, were there a couple that stood out? You're in the theater, the big screen, and you're there with Craig, and you're saying, "Oh my God, there's our stuff." Does it dawn on you?
No. I mean, you know that because you've worked on this thing for months before. Or many times, you know, you complete a project and it doesn't see the light of day for 2 or 3 years, you know, before it's, because they always hold it for the right moment to release the project. But by the time the film is wrapped, you're ready to move on to another project, you know. There have been films that just are like Titanic, which was a good experience at times, and at other times it was, I just wanted to just kind of throw up my hands and walk away. Finished product, even though I kind of wasn't crazy with the storyline, there was enough drama in this story to begin with, and it didn't need all this extra stuff. It could have stood on its own, but it looked fantastic. I mean, it's a classic, so there are many scenes where I can look at that film and know exactly where I found that garment, or you know, that happens a lot. I work a lot with the Coen brothers,
Yeah.
and they love anything that's kind of quirky or off the wall or edgy. So, and there's many things in their films where, you know, you look at that one piece and it brings back memories of where you got this and what you did, and then, you know, there's also times where you see this film and that piece doesn't bring back as pleasant of memory. There was a film called Billy Bathgate. I don't know if you remember that. A decent storyline, but the lead actress, there was a dress. For fittings, I'll give them choices. I'll pull everything that's appropriate, size is right, but in knowing the actor or the actress, they're going to want to be able to choose. I like this one, or I don't like that one. So I'd sent 3 dresses for this one scene, for the fitting for this one scene, and she liked all 3. There was this big debate between everybody which one she get. So she decides on one, but it's an action scene. So that particular dress was a little, the fabric, it was chiffon, which is a very delicate fabric, and there's going to be a lot of action in this scene, and the possibility of this being damaged, you know, that could happen, which if it happened, they would have to reshoot everything on that scene, plus the scene before and the scene after for continuity. So it turned out where she just stood her ground, she insists that she's going to wear this particular dress. So to safeguard everything, they sent the dress to China to have the fabric copied, which was thousands of dollars. All is, you know, everything works out. She's happy, the director's happy, the costume designer's happy. Finish filming. It comes time for billing, and billing is a whole another animal, because now you've left the creative world, and now you're in finance, and it's corporate, and they care nothing about, you know, creative. It's the bottom line. They are wanting discounts. Now I already know that this one dress, how much it costs to have it copied, and my rental fee at that time for cocktail dresses was $250, and it's a production rental, which is 16 weeks. If it goes over 16 weeks, it's another rental period. They've spent thousands of dollars recreating this dress. They don't want to pay the $250 rental fee. And it's like, so it was just this negotiation. I stood my ground, I got paid, But when the movie came out and I saw that, it was such like, you know, it took away from the enjoyment and of the creativity, you know, once it went to the business aspect. But so things like that, sometimes I may concentrate on more and not the movie itself, and I have to stop myself and, like, you know, put that out of your mind now and enjoy this, you know, the finished product of this.
Were you, when you looked at the credits and you saw Dykeman and Young there in the credits, were you always focused in on that?
No, I stopped credits early on. It's like I said, it's corporate, and everything is bottom line profit. So credits, a lot of times credits are in lieu of payment or in lieu of discount. And it's like, no. Everybody that needs to know me or my business already do. I don't, you know, I've never ever advertised, you know, so I have a narrow focus on that. So I'm not willing to trade my labor for a credit that is a half a second on screen that nobody's going to see because 90% of the audience has left the, you know, before the credits even come up. But I mean, early on, there was one time where they did a credit and our names were misspelled. I mean, so, but credits have never been anything, you know, that I've gone after. But,
so how did you decide to come to Jamestown?
We were in LA for a little over 20 years, and most of our friends, our circle of friends, this is right at the height of the AIDS epidemic. And it's like today with the pandemic. It's all this question of what is it, where is it, you know, what's going to happen. So there was this great exodus from not only LA, but San Francisco, New York, Chicago, every major city. And my circle of friends, we were all deciding what we were going to do. And by this time, there are people dying daily that you know, either close or acquaintances, but you know. So it's deciding, it's like, and one night, a group of kind of got together and were just throwing ideas out. And I got a map of the United States out and we put it on the table and we're looking at this and going, what do you want to do? Where do you go? And you looked at that and I'm going, well, I don't want the South and I don't want any of this here, which is Midwest. So it got down to the two coasts. And it turned out to be the same way with most of our friends. And I knew that I didn't want to go to my hometown. Craig wasn't crazy about coming here because by this time, most of his circle of people that he grew up with are either gone or, you know, there isn't a lot of close contact connection. I knew that New York was probably, you know, going to be the winner, but you needed time. So we decided on Cooperstown. It's a close commute to New York, and we would spend the winter in Cooperstown while we looked at property just, you know, on the outskirts of New York. And I called a realtor, and they got some things lined up, and it didn't work out. I came back for 2 weeks. It was a disaster. But by this time, you know, I've already scheduled the moving company to move the house, contents of the house in Los Angeles. I gotta have a destination to put it. So Craig goes, well, let's, you know, go to Jamestown for the winter, and on the weekends, we'll drive to Cooperstown area to look at property. Well, that makes sense. The business is still going on. I got everything lined up, the moving company, everything, found a house in Lakewood, did a lease on that, short-term lease. So everything now is lined up. But the business, which was going to be usually a break in the winter months, didn't stop. It was non-stop, and new projects are coming in, and I'm thinking, what am I going to do? So we thought, well, next month we'll drive to Cooperstown. And it happened where it was next month, and after like 6 months, I thought, let's just stay here, you know? And you know, the thought of packing again and moving the business, it was easier to stay. And then once, you know, we kind of had that, okay, we're settled here, and got to know people, I thought, well, this is not a bad place, you know. Because I was thinking, is this, you know, a really bad decision that we just made? I mean, there wasn't even Wegmans here.
Michael, give me a sense of your holdings. Holdings. You know, it's a number of costumes. You know, it's got to be immense.
Well, it was. My collection is at Western Costume now, and they did an entire new structure to house it. I had a lot of stipulations on what could be done with the collection, how it could be worked. And I had these stipulations for 5 years that, you know, for pre-approval. The 5 years is now finally up, so, but they've done everything that I requested. It's stored the way I want, it's organized the way I want. But there was, in numbers, and this is just garments, it doesn't include accessories, hats, shoes, handbags, all the small stuff. There was over 100,000 garments that had been used in films. Probably twice that much that had never, wasn't even inventoried. I mean, it was an amazing collection.
Wow.
And it was
and at one point you had that all here.
Yes, 2 floors at the old AVM building. All racked out, all, you know, every area, every rack's a certain type of thing. All cleaned and, you know, ready to go. So pull it off this rack and throw it in a box. FedEx takes it to location wherever that is, and the actor puts it on. But it has to come back exactly the same way, ready to go. Yeah, I mean, people, like I said, nobody ever knew. And, you know, I don't know if you're familiar with, the building is torn down now, if you're familiar with that building on Jones and Gifford. But it was right in the middle of, like, just the worst area. But that was kind of my security, because nobody would ever have thought that what was in that building. And across the street is Al's bait shop. Mm-hmm. And there's photos of Al's bait shop sign on many, many desks in Los Angeles. Because when a designer or whoever would come, the director, everybody had to take a picture of the sign, because it was Al's Bait and Porn. Yeah. And which is a brilliant idea. Yeah. It should be franchised. You know.
By the way, did you ever get to know Al at all? Is there an Al?
Yes, there is. I went. My curiosity got the best of me one day.
Sure.
And I said, Craig, I've got to go over there and see what this is about. Because, I mean, the combination of those two things, when you think about it, it's pretty brilliant, you know. So I went in, and it wasn't the greatest experience. He smokes cigars, and the place, he sells live bait. So the odor of those two things combined would just like pretty much knock you over, because I mean it's not the fresh smell of cigar smoke and fresh smell of bait, it's stagnant in there. And the selection of porn, he must have bought out a place that went out of business a number of years ago, because there was nothing contemporary. You look at like the packaging and what they were wearing, it was all like a lot of late 70s, early 80s kind of looking things. And
VHS probably.
Oh, absolutely, yeah.
Well, I buy it every day, and it's always a curiosity. And I always knew there was a place at Jones and Gifford. I knew there was a Dykeman and Young, and that's all I knew. And you were a curiosity.
When we would, I wouldn't allow everybody that wanted to come here to come here. For a few reasons. One was to protect the collection, because I'd only allow it to be used on certain things where I knew it was going to be taken care of. And I didn't really like working with new designers. I wanted somebody that was established, that knew what they were doing, because it would just make life easier. So a lot of times I'd get a call and I would say, I'm sorry, but the ones that I would allow to come here, a lot of them were friends of mine. That Colleen Atwood, she's 3 Academy Awards. Colleen Atwood was here the night before she won her 3rd Academy Award. And I tell my friends, it's, because a lot of people give me grief about 2nd Street. I'm going, if you knew, going, one of my good friends, loves coming here. That doesn't, they don't see the stigma maybe of what people think 2nd Street is or whatever. But when I would pick them up at the airport and bring them into Jamestown, it was like trying to pick and choose your way around town. And it would never be like a really direct, fast route. It would be up the street and down this. But once we got to Jones and Gifford, there was no hiding, And I would say, okay, now we're going to go on this little like mini trip through Appalachia, because the street that dead end, the warehouse kind of set back from the street, and the street that dead end there was 4 houses on it, and one was like worse than the other one. And it was just so trashy. It's like, and people think, oh, where are we going? But after, everybody would always say the same thing, the look of Jamestown. They should film a movie here, and, they would appreciate the architecture and kind of the laid-back lifestyle. But it wasn't sometimes the easiest to get people here that had to come with our little, airport. We had to get limo service a few times because a few people refused to get back on the small plane. So either get a limo to Buffalo or to New York or Pittsburgh or wherever they wanted to go. But
did you have a catalog? Was there something these who didn't know you or did this?
No.
No, it was all word of mouth and.
The collection's up here, because it's all individual. Yeah. Inventory, the pieces that I used I had 3 people that all they did was sew in labels, and that label had my inventory number on it, which corresponded to no computer either. I had this thing about computers for years. Everything handwritten. So that number corresponded to a detailed description of that garment. So if something ever happened, either damage or whatever, there's the proof of what that garment was when it went out the door. But no catalog, just these binders, these 3-ring binders of handwritten descriptions. So for like about 2 years, once the collection moved to Western Costume, there was this one man that all he did was enter my description so it could be barcoded. And it was like, what a boring job.
So where is Western Costume? Where is it?
North Hollywood. Yeah, Western Costume is the largest costume house in the world. It's 110 years old.
Well, they obviously knew you, knew that
Oh, yeah,
the time was
yeah.
right.
It's a very, very competitive business. So all the major players know each other, and they would know more projects that I'm working on than I would know. I mean, it was something you had to keep up with, because a film, once, you know, a project is greenlit, the word gets out very fast to all kinds of departments. This is coming up, and everybody wants kind of a chunk of that action. Prop houses, costume houses, whoever, car rentals. So everybody knew who was working on what and when. Once I decided, after Craig passed away, I kind of was in flux. I didn't know what I wanted to do or go or whatever, and I knew that I had to change what I was doing, my business. So it was a hard decision, but I decided that I had to kind of cut ties with that. So once that word got out that I was thinking about selling, I got a number of calls from all the big costume companies wanting my collection, because whoever got my collection would have a step up on everybody else. And so I put all these stipulations on it, and Western bent over backwards to get it. And you know, it was hard. Once it took 9 53-foot semis to move the collection. It took us 30 days. I went to one of the labor places, I forgot what the name of it was, it's downtown, and hired a crew for 30 days. And all they did is pack e-containers. E-containers hold up to 500 pounds. They're like a giant coffin with this cover. But they're designed to use every square inch of a semi. 3 high, 3 across, all the way from the back to the front. But it took us 30 days to pack it and move it. So once it got to LA, and they did this special space for it and got it all out and everything, they had this big party that I went back for, and to let all the designers know where the collection is, and that was kind of a hard day, because to see it, you know, thinking, oh my God, what did I do? You know, did I make a mistake and sell it? But once I, you know, like I said, once I severed the ties, then it was good. It, you know, went on to something else.
Well, what is that something else? I know you have the store.
Well, that's when I opened up the gallery.
Yeah.
And that was fun. I really, really enjoyed that. There's a great artist community here in Jamestown. Some amazing talent here that just didn't have an outlet. I love art. I've collected art for a long time, and so that was kind of the perfect match. And so did that up until, you know, about 1.5 years ago, when this happened, and, you know, had to close that, because obviously you can't do that if you really can't see what you're putting on the wall. But it was a lot of fun.
You miss it now? I mean,
oh, absolutely. Yeah.
Do people call you? Do you get calls from anybody saying, you know, hey, I got an idea, where would you put me, putting them in the right direction? Oh,
I've done consulting, yeah. I've kind of gotten, this has kind of taken over my life the last 1.5 years. But up until that point, you know, people I worked with for forever and ever, did consulting on projects, advised on certain looks, that was kind of a fun thing too, because then you could walk away at the end of the day and not have to sweat it out. You know? So once this is all settled, the issue that I'm having with my vision, you know, then hopefully I'll come up with something new and interesting to do.
By the way, I want to personally thank you for organizing the purchase of, and I don't know, of the costumes at the Jackson Center. that the Scottish Rite Consistory had.
That, if there had been a little bit more time to kind of get an overall view, but that was fun. And a lot of those have found homes various parts of this country with collectors, and I've used a few theatrically, but there was a lot of interesting things there. That, have you finished redoing all those spaces now, or?
Yeah. So, but again, thank you for that, because if that hadn't happened, to ultimately have the Scottish Rite feel comfortable with you and you with them, and those costumes got out of there, that space would have never been used for anything.
No.
It was incredibly, at a time it was what they used for all their classwork.
Right, right.
So I thank you.
Oh, you're welcome. I mean, it was good on both ends. It worked out for both of us. A lot of history there, and that stuff.
Well, this has been great, Mike. I really appreciate it.